The gunshot fractured the silence like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Thomas Harlan didn't flinch. After 27 years in law enforcement, gunfire registered as background noise like traffic or distant thunder. He sat motionless in his weathered Ford sedan across from the abandoned warehouse rain, drumming a steady rhythm on the roof. The wipers swept back and forth, clearing rivulets that distorted the yellow glow of distant streetlights. His scarred face remained impassive, reflected in the rearview mirror, a permanent reminder of his last case with the FBI 7 years ago. The 8-inch scar running from temple to jaw had long since healed, but the wound beneath never would. The radio on the passenger seat crackled to life. "This is Judge. They've arrived. Package is moving." Thomas tapped the radio twice, acknowledging without speaking. His eyes never left the warehouse loading dock, where 3 black SUVs had just pulled in, headlights cutting through the rain. Men in dark clothing emerged, checking perimeters with practiced efficiency. Thomas's hand moved to the worn pocket watch in his jacket. His thumb traced the inscription on the back: "Time is precious. Spend it wisely." R. Rachel's final gift given the morning she died. 7 years, Thomas whispered to himself, watching armed men secure the warehouse entrance. 7 years is long enough. Thomas's apartment occupied the 3rd floor of a brick building in a forgettable Chicago neighborhood. The space was sparse, functional amongst the cell with better appliances. A single bed, a basic kitchen rarely used for more than coffee, a desk covered with files and newspaper clippings. One wall told the real story of Thomas Harlan's life. Photos, reports, and maps connected by red string formed a spider's web of obsession. News articles about human trafficking operations, surveillance photos of men in expensive suits, court documents, autopsy reports, all orbiting a central photo: a man with cold eyes and a politician's smile. Malcolm Hayes, officially declared dead 7 years ago, though Thomas knew better. At the center of another wall hung a single-frame photograph: Sophia, his 16-year-old daughter, her smile bright against the backdrop of Seattle's Space Needle. She lived with Catherine now. Thomas's younger sister had been there since Rachel's funeral. Safer that way, better for her. Thomas poured 3 fingers of bourbon into a glass that hadn't been washed in days. The amber liquid caught the light as he raised it toward Rachel's photo on his nightstand. "I'm close," he said to the empty room. "They're moving again, just like you said they would." His phone vibrated. Catherine. Thomas let it go to voicemail. He'd call back tomorrow, make the usual excuses. The conversation would follow the familiar script. Catherine would mention Sophia's struggles at school, the therapist's recommendations, the need for a father, not just an occasional voice on the phone. Thomas would promise to visit soon. Both would know it was a lie. The voicemail notification appeared. Thomas ignored it, turning instead to the map spread across his kitchen table. Cargo routes into Chicago, warehouse locations, police patrol schedules, a spider's web of a different kind. Thomas Harlan had been many things in his life: decorated FBI agent, loving husband, neglectful father. Now he was just a ghost with a singular purpose, a hunter tracking prey others believed didn't exist. The pocket watch felt heavy in his hand. 7 minutes past midnight. 7 years since Rachel died, bleeding in his arms, whispering about what she discovered. 7 years since the case that broke him physically and mentally. 7 years since the family had been officially dismantled, its leaders presumed dead in an explosion that leveled their yacht off the Florida coast. A convenient ending that Thomas had never believed. His burner phone rang, the one only Judge used. "It's happening tomorrow night," said the gravelly voice of Victor Reese, former federal prosecutor, now Thomas's only ally in this shadow war. "Container shipment, Pier 17, midnight." "How many?" "At least 24. Women and children, Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia." Thomas closed his eyes. The same signature. The same roots, the same evil wearing a new face. "Malcolm," Thomas asked, the name catching in his throat. No visual confirmation, but the operation has his fingerprints all over it. Thomas studied the map, marking Pier 17 with a red X. "I'll be there," he said. "Surveillance only." Victor's eyes he carried through the phone. "You said that last time. 3 men ended up in the hospital. They were beating a 14-year-old girl. And you almost blew everything. I said, oh, everything we've built. 7 years of work, Thomas. We're close to the inner circle. We need evidence that will stand up in court, not another vigilante incident." Thomas didn't respond. They both knew what this was really about. Justice was Victor's goal. Thomas wanted something darker, more primal. "Just watch and record," Victor said finally. "Please. I'll be in position by 11. Thomas ended the call and returned to the wall of evidence. His fingers traced the red string connecting Malcolm Hayes to a dozen shell companies, political donations, charity foundations. The family had been masterful at hiding in plain sight their legitimate businesses, providing cover for the darkest enterprises imaginable. Human cargo, modern slavery disguised as immigration assistance. Young women promised jobs in America only to be sold into prostitution. Children separated from parents at borders redirected into the hands of predators, all facilitated by corrupt officials, law enforcement, and politicians who either looked the other way or actively participated. And at the center of it all had been Malcolm Hayes, the charming philanthropist whose charitable foundation, New Light, supposedly helped immigrants build new lives in America. Thomas had been so close 7 years ago. His FBI task force had traced financial transactions, followed witnesses, built an airtight case. They were days away from arrests that would have reached into the highest levels of business and government. Then came the call from Rachel, panic in her voice. Someone had broken in. She'd found something in Malcolm's financial records. She'd been working as an accountant at one of his legitimate businesses. Evidence that would have blown the case wide open. Thomas had faced an impossible choice: continue surveillance on Malcolm at a crucial meeting or rush home to his wife. He'd chosen the job. Rachel was still alive when he found her, but barely. Multiple stab wounds. The house ransacked. Her last words were about a hidden flash drive evidence she'd gathered. Thomas never found it. The case imploded. Malcolm disappeared. 3 weeks later, a yacht explosion supposedly killed him and the other family leaders. Case closed according to the FBI. Despite Thomas's protests, his superiors shut down the investigation. But Thomas knew the truth. The convenient explosion, the unidentifiable bodies, the sudden disappearance of witnesses, it was all too perfect. Malcolm Hayes had simply evolved like a virus adapting to antibiotics. And now 7 years later, the virus was active again. Thomas returned to the kitchen table and opened his laptop. Time to prepare for tomorrow night. No mistakes this time. No distractions. His phone vibrated again. Catherine a second time. Unusual. Thomas hesitated, then answered. "It's Sophia," Catherine said, her voice tight with worry. "She's gone." Thomas stood in Sophia's bedroom in Seattle, taking in the chaos of a teenage life. Posters of bands he'd never heard of, clothes strewn across the floor, a laptop open on the unmade bed. "When did you notice she was missing?" he asked Catherine, who hovered in the doorway, arms crossed tightly over her chest. "This morning. She was supposed to be at school. The principal called when she didn't show up for the 3rd day in a row." Catherine's voice cracked. "I thought she was staying with friends. She's been doing that a lot lately." Thomas picked up a framed photo from Sophia's desk, Rachel holding a 10-year-old Sophia, both laughing at some forgotten joke. His chest tightened. "Any idea where she might go?" Catherine handed him a crumpled note. Sophia's handwriting, once neat like Rachel's, now an angry scrawl. "Gone to find Dad. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Thomas closed his eyes, trying to control the panic rising in his throat. If Sophia came looking for him in Chicago, she could be walking into the middle of something deadly. If anyone from the family recognized her. "Has she contacted you?" Catherine asked. "No." Thomas pulled out his phone, checking for missed calls. Nothing. "She's been asking questions, Thomas. About Rachel. About what happened. About why you never visit." Catherine's voice hardened. "I've been covering for you for 7 years, telling her you're working important cases, that you care but just don't know how to show it. I'm running out of excuses." Thomas pocketed the note. "I need to find her, fast." "And then what? Bring her back here and disappear again?" Catherine stepped into the room, forcing Thomas to look at her. "She needs her father, not some ghost who calls on birthdays." Thomas had no answer. He'd failed Rachel. He'd failed Sophia. He'd even failed himself, becoming the shell of the man he once was. But right now, the only thing that mattered was finding Sophia before she stumbled into danger she couldn't possibly understand. "I'll find her," was all he said, moving toward the door. "Thomas," Catherine's voice stopped him. "Whatever you're involved in, whatever's kept you away all these years, is it worth losing her completely?" The pocket watch weighed heavy in his jacket. "Time is precious. Spend it wisely." He left without answering. The Chicago field office of the FBI hadn't changed in 7 years. Same beige walls, same fluorescent lighting that made everyone look sickly. Same security desk where Thomas now stood, feeling like an intruder in the building that had once been his second home. "Agent Morgan is expecting you, Mr. Harlan," the security officer said, handing him a visitor badge. The Mr. stung. Once he'd been Agent Harlan in these halls. Thomas followed a young agent through the maze of cubicles. Eyes tracked his movement. Some faces he recognized, now older. Most were new. The whispers followed him like a shadow. That's Harlan, the one who lost it after his wife was killed. Heard he's been working private security chasing ghosts. Poor bastard never accepted that Hayes died in that explosion. The young agent stopped at a glass-walled office. Agent Morgan, Thomas Harlan is here. Diana Morgan looked up from her computer. 40-something sharp eyes, the no-nonsense posture of someone who'd fought twice as hard as her male colleagues to reach her position. Thomas had never met her, but he knew her reputation. Smart, tenacious, by the book. Thank you, Peterson. She stood gesturing to a chair opposite her desk. Mr. Harlan, thank you for coming in. Thomas remained standing. You said it was urgent. Diana studied him for a moment, then nodded. I'll get right to it. We've noticed your activities around certain shipping terminals and warehouses in the past month. Private security work, nothing illegal. Of course. Diana's smile didn't reach her eyes. Just coincidentally at locations connected to suspected human trafficking operations we're monitoring. Thomas kept his face neutral. I go where my clients need security. And who exactly is your client in this case? When Thomas didn't answer, she continued, because it looks remarkably like you're conducting your own investigation into what you believe is a resurrection of the family organization. The name hung in the air between them. The family, the case that had defined and destroyed Thomas's career. The family was dismantled 7 years ago, Thomas said, repeating the official line. Malcolm Hayes died in that yacht explosion along with his key lieutenants. That's the official position, yes? Diana leaned forward. Though I understand you've always had alternative theories. Thomas said nothing. Diana sighed, changing tactics. Look, I didn't bring you here to rehash old cases. I'm heading a task force on human trafficking. We've been tracking a sophisticated operation bringing women and children through the port of Chicago. The methods match the family's old playbook. She slid a file across the desk. Thomas didn't touch it. We've identified a possible shipment coming in tonight. Pier 17, midnight. Thomas's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. The same information Judge had given him. Was this a coincidence or something more troubling? Why are you telling me this? Because you're going to be there anyway, Diana said bluntly. And I'd rather have you working with us than getting in our way or getting yourself killed. I'm retired. No, you're obsessed. There's a difference. Diana stood moving around the desk to face him directly. I reviewed your work on the family case. It was brilliant. You saw connections nobody else did. You were right about the political protection. They had the financial networks, everything. If your team had moved when you wanted to instead of waiting, my wife might still be alive, Thomas finished flatly. Diana nodded. I'm offering you a chance to finish what you started, officially, as a consultant to my task force. Thomas studied her. Diana Morgan was everything he was not, still believing in the system and justice through proper channels. She hadn't yet learned how deeply corruption could run, how easily evidence could disappear. Witnesses could recant, supervisors could shut down promising leads. What makes you think I have anything to offer? Diana gestured to the chair again. This time Thomas sat. Because you've been tracking them for 7 years, while everyone else believed they were gone. Because you never stopped looking. She returned to her seat. And because you identified Marcus Reed in that warehouse incident last month, a man officially declared dead 7 years ago. So they had been watching him. Thomas kept his face carefully blank. You need to understand something, Agent Morgan. If, and I stress if, the family has reconstituted, they have protection at the highest levels. Last time I trusted the wrong people. It cost me everything. You don't trust me, Diana stated. I don't know you. Diana nodded, accepting this. Fair enough, but I need your knowledge and you need our resources, especially now. She opened a drawer and placed a photograph on the desk. Thomas's heart stopped. Sophia. Walking down a Chicago street he recognized just 3 blocks from his apartment. The timestamp showed yesterday afternoon. Your daughter arrived in Chicago 2 days ago, Diana said quietly. She's been asking questions about you, about your old cases, about Rachel's murder. The room seemed to tilt. Sophia was here in Chicago, looking for him, putting herself directly in the path of the people who had murdered her mother. How did you— Standard procedure to monitor family members of persons of interest, Diana said, but her tone softened. She's staying at the Westin Hotel on Michigan Avenue, room 712. She's safe for now. But if you're right about the family and if they recognize her— Thomas stood abruptly. I need to go, now. Thomas. Diana's use of his first name stopped him. If the family is back, if Malcolm Hayes somehow survived, they've had 7 years to rebuild their network, their protections. You can't fight them alone anymore. Thomas looked at the photo of Sophia again, 16 years old. Rachel's eyes, his stubborn chin, walking unaware into the same danger that had killed her mother. What exactly are you proposing? Work with me, officially. Share what you know. In return, you get access to our resources, our protection, for you and for Sophia. Diana held his gaze. And if you're right about Malcolm Hayes still being alive, we take him down. The right way this time. Thomas thought of Judge and Victor and their years of careful work. The evidence they'd gathered, the trail they'd followed. Could he trust Diana Morgan? Could he trust anyone in the FBI after what happened last time? The pocket watch seemed to burn in his pocket. Time is precious. Spend it wisely. I need to find my daughter first, he said finally. Then we'll talk. Diana nodded. The operation tonight is still happening. My team will be in position, but we're observing only. If you're going to be there, stay out of sight. Don't engage. I'm going to find Sophia. That's my only priority right now. It wasn't quite a lie. Finding Sophia was his priority. But Thomas Harlan had spent 7 years hunting ghosts, and he wasn't about to stop when he was finally getting close. Bye. The Westin Hotel loomed over Michigan Avenue, its glass facade reflecting clouds heavy with impending rain. Thomas stood across the street watching the entrance. Conflicting emotions battled within him, the desperate need to see Sophia, to make sure she was safe, warring with the fear of facing his greatest failure. His phone vibrated. Judge. Where are you? Victor's voice was tense. We need to go over positions for tonight. Change of plans. Sophia's in Chicago. A long silence. How, why? Looking for me, asking questions about Rachel's murder. Jesus, Thomas. Victor's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. If they realize who she is. I know. Thomas watched a young woman exit the hotel, not Sophia. I'm at her hotel now. You need to get her out of Chicago, immediately. Send her back to Seattle. That's the plan. And tonight, Pier 17. Thomas hesitated. I'll be there. With your daughter in town, Thomas, think about what you're... I'll get her on a plane first. Thomas spotted a familiar figure through the hotel's revolving doors. I have to go. He ended the call as Sophia emerged from the hotel. 16 years old, but carrying herself with the forced confidence of someone trying to appear older. Rachel's auburn hair, Rachel's determined walk, but the set of her jaw, the watchful eyes, those were his. Thomas crossed the street, heart pounding harder than it had during any FBI raid. Sophia saw him when he was halfway across her step, faltering. For a moment, he thought she might run. Instead, she stood her ground, chin lifting slightly. 7 years condensed into a single moment as Thomas stopped before his daughter. A foot of space between them might as well have been an ocean. How did you find me? Sophia asked, no greeting, no warmth. I have resources. Thomas searched her face, looking for the little girl he remembered. You shouldn't be here, Sophia. Where should I be saddled, pretending I have a normal life, a normal family? Her voice was steady, controlled, but anger simmered beneath the surface. Aunt Catherine is running out of excuses for you. A couple passed by, forcing them to step aside. Thomas gestured to a nearby cafe. Can we talk, please? Sophia hesitated, then nodded stiffly. They walked in silence to the cafe, took a booth in the back. Thomas positioned himself facing the door, old habits. Sophia noticed one eyebrow raising slightly. She'd always been observant, even as a child. You're not wearing your FBI pin, she said after they'd ordered coffee. The one Mom gave you. The casual mention of Rachel hit Thomas like a physical blow. I don't work for the FBI anymore. I know. Private security now, right? At least that's what Aunt Catherine says. Sophia stirred her coffee, not drinking it. But that's not true, is it? You're still hunting the people who killed Mom. Thomas stared at her. How do you... I'm not a child anymore. I can use Google. Sophia's eyes, Rachel's eyes, fixed on him accusingly. 7 years, Dad. 7 years of birthday cards and Christmas gifts, but no visits, no real calls. Just a ghost who used to be my father. Each word was precisely aimed, finding vulnerable spots with unerring accuracy. Thomas had faced hardened criminals who couldn't wound him as effectively as his 16-year-old daughter. I'm sorry, he said, the words inadequate even as he spoke them. After your mother died, I couldn't what be a father care about anyone but yourself and your obsession? Sophia's composure cracked, her voice rising. Mom died and I lost both parents that day. The couple at the next table glanced over. Thomas leaned forward, lowering his voice. Sophia, there are things you don't understand, dangerous things. That's why I kept my distance to protect you. Protect me. She laughed, a bitter sound no 16-year-old should be capable of making. From what the truth that you chose your job over mom that night, that you've been choosing your revenge over me ever since. Thomas flinched as if she'd slapped him. That's not fair. Fair. Sophia's eyes welled with tears she refused to let fall. Was it fair that I had to hear from school friends that my mom was murdered? That Aunt Catherine had to explain why you sent me away? That I've spent 7 years wondering what I did wrong, why my own father doesn't want me? That's not true. Thomas reached across the table, but Sophia pulled her hands away. I've always wanted you. I've always loved you. But the people who killed your mother, they're still out there. They're powerful, connected. If they knew about you, if they thought you could be used against me, so I'm just a liability, a weakness they could exploit. Sophia's voice was flat. That's why you stayed away, not to protect me, to protect your mission. Before Thomas could respond, his phone vibrated. Diana Morgan. He ignored it. I made choices, Thomas admitted. Terrible choices. I can't change the past, but I'm here now. And I need you to go back to Seattle today. It's not safe for you in Chicago. Because of what you're doing, Sophia leaned forward. Tell me the truth, Dad, all of it. What happened to Mom? What are you really doing in Chicago? Who are you hunting? Thomas hesitated. How much could he tell her? How much should he? She deserved the truth, but the truth was a dangerous weapon. His phone vibrated again. Diana, a second time. Something was wrong. I need to take this, he said, rising from the table. I'll be right back. Sophia's expression closed. Of course you do. Thomas stepped outside the cafe, answering the phone. What is it? They've moved the shipment, Diana said without preamble. It's happening now. Pier 17. My team is en route. Thomas looked through the cafe window at Sophia, who stared into her coffee, shoulders rigid with hurt and anger. I can't. My daughter. Thomas, we've identified Marcus Reed on site, and there's more. One of our surveillance cameras picked up someone who matches Malcolm Hayes' description. The name sent a jolt through Thomas's system. Malcolm Hayes, the man who had ordered Rachel's murder. Possibly alive, definitely in Chicago, and moving his operation now. That's impossible. Your people must be mistaken. Maybe. That's why I need your eyes. You know Hayes better than anyone. Thomas looked at Sophia again. His daughter. His responsibility. The reason he should walk away from this obsession once and for all. But Malcolm Hayes, the architect of Rachel's murder, the man Thomas had hunted for 7 years. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Thomas said finally. But I need a favor. I need someone to watch my daughter. Keep her safe. I'll send Agent Peterson to the cafe. He'll stay with her until you return. Thomas ended the call and returned to the table. Sophia didn't look up. I have to go, he said, hating himself for the words. There's a situation. A situation. Sophia's voice was empty. More important than your daughter, who you haven't seen in 7 years. This is connected to your mother's murder, Thomas said, deciding honesty was the only path forward. The people responsible, there's a chance to finally get evidence against them. Real evidence. Sophia finally looked up, her expression unreadable. So you're choosing the job again? Just like that night. The words cut deep because they were true. Thomas was making the same choice that had cost Rachel her life. But this time, he would make sure Sophia was protected. A young agent named Peterson is coming to stay with you. He'll take you somewhere safe until I get back. Then we'll talk, I promise, the whole truth. More promises. Sophia's smile was a brittle thing. At least you're consistent. Thomas wanted to say more to make her understand, but time was slipping away. Malcolm Hayes was at Pier 17. The ghost he'd been chasing for 7 years had finally materialized. I'll be back as soon as I can, he said, placing money on the table for the coffee. Please stay with Peterson. It's important. As Thomas walked away, Sophia's voice stopped him. Dad. He turned. For a moment, he saw his little girl again, vulnerable and needing him. Be careful, she said, her voice smaller than before. Thomas nodded, throat tight with emotion he couldn't express. I will. Outside, rain had begun to fall, a light drizzle that promised to become something heavier. Thomas spotted Agent Peterson approaching, young and earnest-looking. They spoke briefly, Thomas giving instructions, emphasizing Sophia's safety above all else. As Thomas walked away, the rain intensified, soaking through his jacket. The pocket watch weighed heavy against his chest. Time is precious. Spend it wisely. He was making the wrong choice again. He knew it, But 7 years of obsession couldn't be abandoned, not when Malcolm Hayes was finally within reach. Thomas flagged down a taxi, giving the driver an address 3 blocks from Pier 17. As the cab pulled away, he glanced back at the cafe. Through the window, he could see Sophia talking to Peterson, her expression guarded. "I'm sorry," Thomas whispered to the rain-streaked window. "I'll make it right, I promise." But promises were cheap, actions were what mattered, and once again, Thomas Harlan was choosing the hunt over his family. The taxi accelerated through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago, carrying Thomas toward the pier, toward Malcolm Hayes, toward the culmination of 7 years of single-minded pursuit, toward a confrontation that would change everything. And Pier 17 loomed through the rain, a concrete monster stretching into Lake Michigan. Security lights cast yellow pools across wet pavement. 3 shipping containers stood isolated at the far end, away from the main terminal operations. 4 black SUVs formed a perimeter around them. Armed men in dark raincoats stood watch. Thomas crouched behind a stack of pallets, rain dripping from his hair into his eyes. Diana and her team were nowhere in sight, maintaining distance, observing only as she'd said. Through binoculars, Thomas scanned the area, counting guards, identifying positions, looking for there. A tall figure emerged from the lead SUV, expensive overcoat repelling the rain. Even from this distance, Thomas recognized the confident stride, the commanding presence. Malcolm Hayes. Older than in Thomas's memory, silver now threading his dark hair, but unmistakably alive. Hatred surged through Thomas's veins, hot and electric. The man who had ordered Rachel's murder. The man whose organization had destroyed countless lives. Standing in the rain, giving orders as if the past 7 years had never happened. Thomas reached for his phone to contact Diana to confirm Hayes' identity when movement caught his eye. A shorter, muscular man approached Hayes. Thomas adjusted the binoculars, focusing on the newcomer's face. Marcus Reed, Malcolm's head of security 7 years ago. Another ghost returned to life. They were all here, all the phantoms Thomas had chased through countless sleepless nights. Real, tangible, within reach. His phone vibrated. "Judge, where are you?" Victor's voice was tense. "In position at Pier 17, Thomas whispered. "Hayes is here. Reed too. They're alive, Victor. They're all alive. Listen to me carefully." Victor's voice took on an urgency Thomas had never heard before. "You need to leave. Now. It's a trap." "What are you talking about?" "The FBI team, they're not coming. There's no backup. Agent Morgan has been feeding you information to lure you out." Thomas's blood ran cold. "How do you know this?" "Because I just intercepted communications between her and Malcolm Hayes. She works for him, Thomas. Has for years. She's the one who helped them fake their deaths 7 years ago." The world seemed to tilt beneath Thomas's feet. Diana Morgan, working for Hayes. The perfect bait, a chance to finally catch Malcolm, to get justice for Rachel. "Sophia," Thomas breathed, panic rising. "She sent an agent to watch Sophia. Peterson, he's one of theirs too. Thomas, they have your daughter." The binoculars slipped from Thomas's numb fingers, clattering on the concrete. Sophia, his daughter, in the hands of the people who had murdered Rachel. He'd made the same mistake again. Chosen the job over family. And this time it might cost him Sophia. "Where?" Thomas's voice was barely human. "Where have they taken her?" "I don't know yet, but I'm working on it." "Thomas, listen to me. You need to get out of there. They're closing in on your position right now." As if on cue, Thomas heard footsteps approaching from behind. He turned to see 4 men moving toward him, weapons drawn. Ahead at the containers, Malcolm Hayes was looking directly at his hiding spot, smiling that politician's smile. "It's too late," Thomas said into the phone. "They're here." "Thomas, don't." But Thomas had already ended the call, slipping the phone into his pocket. His hand found the worn pocket watch instead. Time is precious. Spend it wisely. For 7 years, he'd spent his time hunting ghosts, seeking revenge, rather than protecting what mattered most. Now Sophia would pay the price for his obsession. As the armed men surrounded him, Thomas Harlan made a silent vow. If he survived this night, he would make a different choice. The right choice. Family over vengeance. Sophia over everything. But first he had to find her, had to save her, had to make sure Malcolm Hayes never hurt another person he loved. "Mr. Harlan," one of the men said, gesturing with his weapon, "Mr. Hayes would like a word." Thomas stood slowly, hands raised. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead, ran in rivulets down his scarred face. Ahead, Malcolm Hayes waited, the architect of so much suffering. Behind, the vast darkness of Lake Michigan stretched to the horizon. 7 years of pursuit had led to this moment. But for the first time since Rachel's death, Thomas wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about Sophia, about second chances, about what he would do to make sure his daughter survived this night. "Take me to him," Thomas said, stepping forward into the rain, into the trap, into whatever came next. Time is precious, and Thomas Harlan had finally realized how he needed to spend his. Malcolm Hayes stood in the rain like a man who owned the weather itself. His tailored overcoat remained impossibly dry while water cascaded from its edges, creating a small moat around his Italian leather shoes. 7 years had added silver to his temples and lines around his eyes, but the cold calculation in his gaze remained unchanged. "Agent Harlan," he said as though greeting an old colleague. "Or I suppose it's just Mr. Harlan these days." Thomas stood before him, hands zip-tied behind his back, surrounded by armed men. The rain had soaked through his jacket, his shirt, his very skin, a bone-deep cold that matched the ice in his veins. "Where is my daughter?" The words emerged as a growl. Malcolm raised an eyebrow, the picture of aristocratic surprise. "Right to business. No catching up. No questions about my remarkable resurrection." When Thomas remained silent, Malcolm sighed. "Your daughter is safe, for now. Her continued well-being depends entirely on your cooperation. If you hurt her, please." Malcolm waved a dismissive hand. "Threats from a man in your position are merely noise. Besides, I'm not a monster. Children should never suffer for their parents' mistakes." His smile turned razor-sharp. "Though I believe you've made your daughter suffer quite enough already, haven't you? 7 years of abandonment, choosing your obsession over her welfare. She has quite a bit to say about that." The casual cruelty of the words struck Thomas like physical blows. Every accusation true, every wound self-inflicted. "I want to see her. All in good time." Malcolm gestured toward the shipping containers. "First, I believe a reunion is in order." Two guards approached, half dragging a figure between them. Female, head covered with a black hood. For one horrifying moment, Thomas thought it was Sophia, but the build was wrong. Taller, a woman, not a teenager. The hood was removed, revealing Diana Morgan's face, bruised and bloodied, but defiant. Her eyes widened at the sight of Thomas. "I'm sorry," she said, blood trickling from her split lip. "They knew about the operation. They were waiting for us." Malcolm Hayes chuckled. "Agent Morgan has been a persistent thorn in my side for months, dismantling my smaller operations, following financial trails, getting closer and closer to the truth." He patted Diana's cheek condescendingly. "Quite impressive, really, though not nearly as single-minded as your 7-year crusade, Mr. Harlan." Thomas's mind raced. Diana wasn't working for Hayes. She was legitimate, which meant, "Victor lied to me," he said aloud, the realization crystallizing. "Judge, he's the one working for you." Malcolm's smile was all the confirmation he needed. "Victor Reese has been an invaluable asset for over a decade," Malcolm said. "His position as federal prosecutor allowed him to redirect investigations, suppress evidence, ensure the right judges heard the right cases." He moved closer to Thomas, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "He was the one who convinced your FBI superiors to delay the raid 7 years ago. The one who made sure you were occupied while my men visited your home. The one who guided you toward dead ends for 7 years while we rebuilt our organization." Each word hammered another nail into Thomas's coffin of failure. Victor, his only ally, his partner in the shadow war against the family, had been playing him from the beginning, feeding him just enough truth to keep him chasing ghosts while the real operation continued unimpeded. "Why not just kill me?" Thomas asked. 7 years ago, or any time since?" "An excellent question." Malcolm began walking along the pier, gesturing for the guards to bring Thomas and Diana. "Initially, it was simply more convenient to discredit you. The traumatized agent broken by his wife's murder, chasing conspiracy theories. Much cleaner than creating another FBI martyr." They stopped at the edge of the pier, beyond Lake Michigan, stretched into darkness, its surface churned by rain and wind. "Then I recognized your value. Your obsession made you predictable. Victor could steer you away from our actual operations by dangling occasional breadcrumbs about my survival. Meanwhile, your reputation for instability ensured no one took your theories seriously." Malcolm smiled again. "You became our perfect distraction. And my daughter, was kidnapping her always part of the plan? A recent improvisation. Agent Morgan was getting uncomfortably close to our Chicago operation. We needed to flush her out, identify her team." Malcolm shrugged. "Your daughter's arrival in Chicago provided the perfect opportunity. I knew you'd contact the FBI once you discovered she was here. After that, it was simply a matter of following the connections." Thomas lunged forward to rage overwhelming caution, but the guards restrained him effortlessly. Malcolm didn't even flinch. "Where is she?" Thomas demanded, struggling against the hands holding him back. Safe, confused, angry. Malcolm studied Thomas with clinical detachment. "She blames you, you know, for everything. For her mother's death, for abandoning her, for putting your vendetta above her welfare. Even now, she believes you chose to pursue me rather than protect her." Each word was precisely calibrated to cause maximum pain, because each word was true. "What do you want from me?" Thomas asked, the fight draining from him. "Information, names, evidence." Malcolm's expression hardened. "Over 7 years, you've accumulated quite a file on my organization. Names of associates, financial connections, properties. I want to know who else has this information, who you've shared it with, where it's stored. And if I tell you, then Agent Morgan goes free. Your daughter goes free. You all live." "He's lying," Diana said, earning a backhanded slap from one of the guards. Malcolm sighed. "I'm many things, Mr. Harlan, but I'm not needlessly cruel. I don't want your daughter's death on my conscience, nor Agent Morgan's. Tell me what I want to know, and this ends tonight." Thomas looked at Diana, her face bleeding but her eyes still fierce. Then he thought of Sophia. 16 years old, hating him, afraid, lone. He'd already lost Rachel. He couldn't lose Sophia too. "There's a storage unit," Thomas said finally. "South side, everything I've collected is there. Files, photos, financial records, no copies, no cloud backups, just hard evidence." Malcolm studied him, searching for deception. The address, Thomas gave it. Not a lie the storage unit existed, but the most damning evidence, the proof that could destroy the family, wasn't there. It was in the pocket watch he still carried. Rachel's final gift, the one containing the hidden flash drive she'd mentioned with her dying breath, which Thomas had found years later concealed in the watch's inner casing. But Malcolm didn't need to know that, not yet. "Excellent." Malcolm nodded to one of his men. "Check it out. Take a team." The man nodded and walked away, speaking into a radio. Now Thomas said, "My daughter." "Patience, Mr. Harlan. First we verify your information, then we discuss your daughter's return." Malcolm checked his watch. "It shouldn't take long. In the meantime, perhaps you'd like to catch up with Agent Morgan. I'm sure you have much to discuss." Malcolm walked away, conferring quietly with Marcus Reed, leaving Thomas and Diana guarded by 4 armed men at the pier's edge. "I'm sorry," Diana said quietly. "They knew everything, our positions, our communications. They killed 3 of my team before I was captured." "Victor?" Thomas said, the name bitter on his tongue. "He's been playing both sides for years." "Reese, the former prosecutor." Diana shook her head. "We vetted him. His record was clean." "The best covers always are." Thomas tested the zip ties binding his wrists. "Too tight, no give." "What about Sophia? Have you heard anything about where they might be holding her?" "Nothing concrete, but based on communications I overheard, I think she's at a property in Lake Forest." Hayes mentioned the North House several times. Thomas's mind raced. Lake Forest, exclusive suburb north of the city. Old money, privacy, perfect place to hide someone without arousing suspicion. "If we get out of this," he said, keeping his voice low, "that's where we go first." Diana's expression was grim. "That's a significant if, Harlan. Hayes has no intention of letting any of us walk away from this pier." Thomas knew she was right. The moment Hayes's men confirmed the storage unit contents, they would all be killed, bodies dumped in Lake Michigan, weighted down, unlikely to surface until decomposition had rendered identification difficult. A common end for Hayes's problems. "I need you to be ready," Thomas said, eyes scanning their surroundings. 4 guards, armed with handguns, Hayes and Reed conferring 30 yards away. The shipping containers offering potential cover. "When I make my move, run for the containers. Don't wait for me." What move? Were bound and surrounded. Thomas didn't answer. His focus had shifted to a distant figure approaching along the pier. Victor Reese, judge, his betrayer. Victor walked with the slightly stooped posture of a man in his 70s, his raincoat buttoned against the weather. When he reached them, he dismissed the guards with a nod, moving them back to a distance where conversation couldn't be overheard. "Thomas," Victor said, his gravelly voice carrying a weight of false regret, "I wish it hadn't come to this." 7 years, Thomas replied, voice hollow. 7 years of feeding me just enough hope to keep me going, to keep me distracted. Was any of it real, Victor? Any of it at all? Victor sighed, a perfect imitation of genuine remorse. "My concern for your daughter was real, is real. That's why I'm here now. He moved closer, lowering his voice. Malcolm has no intention of releasing her, regardless of what you tell him. Once he has what he wants, you'll all be killed, including Sophia. She's seen too much. Thomas felt the last remnants of hope drain away. Then why are you here? To offer you a chance. Victor reached into his coat, withdrawing a small folding knife. One chance to save her. He slipped the knife into Thomas's jacket pocket, the movement concealed from the distant guards by his body. Why, Thomas asked, confusion replacing anger. Because some lines shouldn't be crossed. Children shouldn't pay for their parents' mistakes. Victor's eyes, roomy with age but suddenly clear with purpose, met Thomas's. I've done terrible things, Thomas. Unforgivable things. But I draw the line at harming children. Before Thomas could respond, Victor stepped back, raising his voice for the benefit of the guards. Hayes is waiting for confirmation from the storage unit. You've got 10 minutes, maybe less. Make your peace with whatever God you believe in. He walked away, shoulders hunched against the rain, leaving Thomas with the concealed knife and a fragile, unexpected hope. What was that about? Diana whispered. Our one chance, Thomas replied, his fingers already working the knife from his pocket. Be ready. The storage unit was exactly as Thomas had described. A small anonymous space in a facility on Chicago's south side. Metal door. Padlock. Inside filing cabinets, boxes of corkboard covered with photos and maps, 7 years of investigation meticulously documented. Malcolm Hayes's men moved methodically through the evidence, photographing everything, collecting files, downloading digital content from the laptop found on a small desk. Sir, one man said into his phone, it's all here, everything Harlan claimed. Financial records, surveillance photos, witness statements. He's been tracking the entire operation for years. On the pier, Malcolm Hayes listened, a thin smile spreading across his face. Any indication he shared this information with others? None that we can find. Looks like he was working alone or just with Reese. Good. Pack everything up. Bring it to the secondary location, then burn the unit. Leave nothing. Malcolm ended the call, turning to Marcus Reed with satisfaction. It appears Mr. Harlan was telling the truth. How refreshing. And now? Marcus asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Now we conclude our business here and proceed with the shipment as planned. Malcolm glanced toward the pier's edge where Thomas and Diana remained guarded. Make sure it's clean, no traces. Marcus nodded, hand moving to the weapon holstered beneath his coat. And the girl, Harlan's daughter. Malcolm hesitated, the first sign of genuine uncertainty he'd shown all night. She's seen nothing of consequence. Knows nothing specific. Release her once we're finished here. Somewhere public. Anonymous call to the police. She could identify. She's 16 years old, Marcus. Traumatized, confused. Her testimony would be easily discredited. Malcolm's tone hardened. I said release her. That's final. Marcus nodded stiffly and walked toward the guards at the pier's edge, hand still resting on his concealed weapon. Bissam. The knife Victor had slipped Thomas was small but sharp. Working blind hands behind his back, Thomas slowly sawed through the plastic zip ties. The rain provided cover, masking small movements, while Diana positioned herself to block the guard's view. They're coming back, Diana whispered, watching Marcus approach with measured strides. Whatever you're planning, do it now. The zip tie parted with a slight snap just as Marcus reached them. Thomas kept his hands behind his back, maintaining the illusion of restraint. Hayes received confirmation. Marcus said, his voice flat. You're no longer needed. He drew his weapon, a silenced handgun that would make little noise over the sound of rain and waves. Thomas had one chance, one moment, when Marcus's attention would divide between two targets. My daughter, Thomas said, desperation real in his voice. Hayes promised. Hayes promises many things, Marcus replied, raising the weapon toward Diana first. Few of them sincere. In that split second, when Marcus's focus shifted to Diana, Thomas moved. His hands came from behind his back, one grabbing Marcus's gun arm, twisting it upward. The gun discharged the silenced shot, disappearing into the rainy night. Thomas's other hand drove the small knife into Marcus's shoulder, finding the nerve cluster that temporarily paralyzed the arm. The gun clattered to the pier. Thomas kicked it toward Diana, who, despite bound hands, managed to trap it beneath her foot. Marcus recovered quickly, training overcoming pain. He struck with his good arm a vicious blow that caught Thomas in the ribs. But Thomas had anticipated this, rolling with the punch, using Marcus's momentum to pull him off balance. The guards, momentarily stunned by the sudden violence, began to react. Diana, in a display of remarkable flexibility, managed to retrieve the gun from beneath her foot, awkwardly gripping it with her still bound hands. Down! She shouted to Thomas, who dropped as she fired 2 shots. One guard fell, clutching his leg. the others scattered, drawing weapons. Thomas and Marcus grappled on the wet concrete, each seeking leverage. Despite his wound, Marcus was formidable, younger, stronger, professionally trained. But Thomas fought with the desperate strength of a father trying to reach his child. He drove a knee into Marcus's wounded shoulder, eliciting a grunt of pain, then slammed his forehead into the bridge of Marcus's nose. Bone cracked. Blood sprayed. Marcus fell back, momentarily stunned. Thomas scrambled to his feet, grabbing the knife from where it had fallen. Diana was pinned down behind a concrete pylon, exchanging fire with the remaining guards. Beyond them, Malcolm Hayes was retreating toward the SUVs, shouting orders. "Diana," Thomas called, sliding to cover beside her. He cut her zip ties with the bloodied knife. "We need to move, now." She passed him the gun, which had 2 rounds remaining. "Hayes is getting away." "Let him. We need to find Sophia first." A bullet ricocheted off the concrete near Thomas's head, sending chips flying. He peered around the pylon, located the shooter, and fired one precious round. The guard fell. Lake Forest, Diana said, her FBI training asserting itself despite the chaos. "Northern suburbs, but we need transportation." Thomas spotted an opportunity, a security guard's vehicle parked near the shipping containers. If they could reach it. "Cover me," he said, handing the gun back to Diana, "when I give the signal, run for that car." Before she could protest, Thomas was moving, staying low, using the containers for cover. The remaining guards focused on Diana's position, didn't immediately notice him flanking them. He reached the far side of the pier, then circled back, approaching the nearest guard from behind. The takedown was silent and efficient, a chokehold applied with precise pressure, cutting off blood flow to the brain. The guard collapsed without a sound. Thomas relieved him of his weapon and radio. Now armed, Thomas signaled Diana. She broke cover, sprinting toward the security vehicle while Thomas provided suppressing fire. Bullets pinged off metal containers and concrete as the remaining guards returned fire. Thomas reached the vehicle seconds after Diana. Keys in the ignition, a stroke of luck. Diana slid behind the wheel, Thomas into the passenger seat. The engine roared to life just as bullets shattered the rear window. Diana accelerated, tires squealing on wet concrete. More bullets followed them. One puncturing the trunk, another taking out a taillight. Then they were beyond effective range, speeding away from Pier 17, from Malcolm Hayes, from the trap that had nearly claimed their lives. "Lake Forest," Thomas said, checking the weapon. He had taken a Glock with a full magazine. "Hayes has a property there. That's where they're holding Sophia." Diana nodded grimly, navigating the rain-slick streets with professional skill. "Even if we're right about the location, Hayes will have called ahead. They'll be expecting us." "I know." Thomas stared out at the rain-washed city sliding past the windows. "But they won't be expecting what I'm bringing." His hand went to the pocket watch, Rachel's final gift. The hidden flash drive containing evidence that could destroy the family. Evidence he'd been saving for the perfect moment. That moment had finally arrived. Sophia Harlan sat in the windowless room, wrists zip-tied to the arms of a wooden chair. The basement was finished, almost comfortable, carpeted floors, recessed lighting, expensive furniture. A prison disguised as a luxury estate. "Your father has made his choice," Elena Varga said, setting a glass of water on the table beside Sophia. Again. Elena, tall, elegant, with the cold beauty of a predator, had been Sophia's handler since she was taken from the cafe. No physical abuse, no explicit threats, just a constant psychological pressure, reminding Sophia of her father's abandonment, reinforcing her deepest fears and resentments. "He'll come for me," Sophia said, but the confidence in her voice was forced. Elena smiled, the expression never reaching her eyes. "Perhaps, but not in time." She checked her designer watch. "Mr. Hayes has concluded his business with your father by now. We'll be moving you shortly." "Moving me where?" Sophia asked, unable to keep the fear from her voice. "Somewhere you'll be of continued use." Elena's phone buzzed. She checked the message, her composure slipping for the first time. "Impossible," she muttered. "What is it?" Sophia asked, hope flaring despite herself. Elena didn't answer, and instead walking briskly to the door and exiting, leaving Sophia alone in the luxurious prison. The moment the door closed, Sophia resumed working at the zip ties. Hours of subtle manipulation had created the slightest bit of give in the plastic, not enough to free herself yet, but progress. Her wrists were raw and bleeding from the effort, but she continued, ignoring the pain. She'd be damned if she'd wait helplessly for rescue. Her mother wouldn't have. And despite everything, despite 7 years of abandonment and broken promises, Sophia was still Thomas Harlan's daughter. The Lake Forest estate sprawled across manicured grounds, its stone facade illuminated by tasteful landscape lighting despite the late hour. A 10-foot wall surrounded the property, interrupted only by an imposing gate monitored by security cameras. The rain had tapered to a drizzle, but dark clouds still obscured the moon and stars. Thomas and Diana observed from a concealed position across the street, assessing security. 2 guards at the gate, Diana noted, peering through binoculars. Probably more inside. Motion sensors along the wall. Cameras at all entry points. Hayes's personal residence, Thomas confirmed. One of several properties held through shell companies. He wouldn't keep Sophia in any location directly tied to the family. How do you want to play this, Diana asked. We could call for backup, but without concrete evidence. No backup, Thomas interrupted. Not yet. Hayes has protection at every level. Official channels would only warn him before we could reach Sophia. Then what's the plan? We can't exactly walk through the front gate. Thomas studied the property, identifying vulnerabilities, potential entry points. 7 years of obsession had made him intimately familiar with Malcolm Hayes' habits, preferences, security protocols. There's a service entrance on the east side, he said. Delivery vehicles, staff access, security will be lighter there. Still need to get past the wall and whatever guards are posted. Thomas reached into his jacket, withdrawing the pocket watch. With practiced precision, he twisted the crown, then pressed a hidden catch. The back of the watch popped open, revealing a concealed compartment containing a small flash drive. What's that? Diana asked. Rachel's insurance policy. Thomas's voice was tight with controlled emotion. The evidence she found before she was killed. Financial records linking Hayes to corrupt officials, judges, law enforcement. Names, dates, account numbers. Everything we need to bring down the family's protection network. Diana stared at the tiny device. You've had this for 7 years. Why not come forward sooner? I didn't find it until 3 years after Rachel died. By then I was discredited, obsessed, unreliable in the eyes of the FBI. No one would have believed me. Thomas's fingers closed around the flash drive. Besides, I was waiting for the right moment, the moment when Hayes would be most vulnerable. And now we use it as leverage. Thomas pulled out the burner phone he'd taken from one of the guards at the pier. We call Hayes, offer a trade, the evidence for Sophia. He'll never agree. The moment he has that flash drive, we're all dead. He won't agree, Thomas acknowledged, but he'll talk. He'll negotiate. And while he's focused on us, you'll enter through the service entrance and find Sophia. Diana frowned. Split up, that's too risky. It's our only play. Thomas handed her the gun he'd taken from the guard. I'll keep Hayes occupied. You find my daughter. Before Diana could protest further, Thomas dialed a number he'd memorized years ago but never called. Hayes' private line, the phone that never left his person. 3 rings, then a click. This is an unexpected call, Mr. Harlan. Malcolm's voice was calm, controlled, betraying no sign of the chaos at the pier. I must say your escape was impressive, messy, but impressive. I want to speak to my daughter, Thomas said, cutting through the pleasantries. I'm afraid that's not possible at the moment. She's indisposed. If you've heard her, please. We've been through this already. Malcolm's sigh carried clearly through the connection. Your threats are meaningless. Your position is untenable. Why exactly are you calling? To offer a trade. Thomas glanced at Diana, who was checking her weapon, preparing to move. Rachel's evidence, all of it, in exchange for Sophia's safe return. A pause, brief but significant. I'm not sure what evidence you're referring to, Malcolm said finally, but there was a new tension in his voice. The flash drive Rachel hid before she died. The one containing records of every bribe you've paid, every official you've compromised, names, dates, account numbers, everything needed to dismantle your protection network. Another pause, longer this time. If such evidence existed, Malcolm said carefully, it would be extremely valuable, but also dangerous for anyone possessing it. I'm outside your Lake Forest property right now, Thomas said, playing his hand. Alone, unarmed. The flash drive is with me, Sophia for the evidence. That's the deal. The silence stretched. Thomas could almost hear Malcolm calculating, weighing options, assessing risks. How do I know you actually have this evidence, that this isn't some desperate bluff? William Cartwright. Thomas said, naming a federal judge whose sudden retirement had never been adequately explained. 5 payments of $250,000 each routed through the Cayman Islands. Dates, account numbers all documented. That's just one example of dozens. The intake of breath was slight but audible. Thomas had struck a nerve. Perhaps we should discuss this in person, Malcolm said finally. Come to the gate, alone. We'll talk. First proof that Sophia is alive and unharmed. Of course. The line went silent for nearly a minute. Then Sophia's voice came through shaky but defiant. Dad, don't trust them. They're going to... The connection cut off abruptly. Thomas's hand tightened on the phone knuckles, white with strain. 10 minutes, Malcolm's voice returned. The front gate, alone. Any sign of police or FBI in this conversation changes dramatically. The line went dead. He's stalling, Diana said immediately. Buying time to move Sophia or worse. I know. Thomas pocketed the phone. But he's also curious, concerned. The evidence Rachel found was his one vulnerability. He needs to know if I really have it. So what now? Now I keep my appointment at the front gate, create the biggest distraction I can. Thomas met Diana's gaze steadily. And you find my daughter. Diana nodded, all professional focus now. If she's on the property, I'll find her. But Thomas, be careful. Hayes won't risk exposure. Once he has that evidence, I know. Thomas checked his watch, not the pocket watch containing the evidence, but a standard timepiece on his wrist. 10 minutes. You should move now. East Wall Service entrance. Diana hesitated, then did something unexpected. She hugged him briefly. For Sophia's sake, stay alive. Then she was gone, moving through shadows toward the east side of the property, leaving Thomas alone with Rachel's evidence and 7 years of accumulated rage. The pocket watch felt heavy in his hand. Inside was everything needed to destroy Malcolm Hayes, not just kill him, but dismantle his entire network of protection. It was what Thomas had been working toward for 7 years. Justice for Rachel, vengeance against the man who had taken her from him. But none of that mattered now. Only Sophia mattered. Thomas tucked the watch away and began walking toward the front gate, toward Malcolm Hayes, toward whatever came next.
Yeah.
The gate opened with an electronic hum as Thomas approached. No guards visible now, withdrawn to less obvious positions. No doubt weapons trained on him from concealment. Thomas walked up, the curved driveway gravel crunching beneath his feet, the manicured ground stretching out on either side. The house itself was a monument to wealth and Power Stone, and glass arranged in clean modern lines illuminated against the night sky. Malcolm Hayes stood on the front steps, flanked by Marcus Reed, whose broken nose had been bandaged, and another guard Thomas didn't recognize. Mr. Harlan, Malcolm called as though welcoming an expected dinner guest. Quite a persistent man, aren't you? Most would have accepted defeat after our encounter at the pier. Thomas stopped at the foot of the steps, maintaining distance. Where is my daughter? Safe, unharmed, as promised. Malcolm descended a step. Though I must say your concern rings somewhat hollow after 7 years of neglect. Did you know she keeps a journal quite detailed? Quite resentful. The casual mention of Sophia's private thoughts was calculated to provoke. Thomas didn't take the bait. The evidence for my daughter. That's why I'm here. Of course, Malcolm smiled thinly. May I see this evidence first as a show of good faith? When I see Sophia, Malcolm sighed theatrically. Such distrust. Understandable, I suppose, given our history. He gestured to the guard. Bring Ms. Harlan, please. Let's put her father's mind at ease. The guard disappeared into the house. Thomas remained motionless, acutely aware of Marcus Reed's hostile presence. The probable snipers positioned around the property. He was exposed vulnerable. His only protection was Hayes' curiosity about the evidence. Minutes passed in tense silence. Finally, the front door opened again. The guard emerged, followed by Elena Varga, who had a proprietary hand on Sophia's shoulder. Thomas's breath caught at the sight of his daughter. She looked exhausted, her wrists raw from restraints, but her eyes still held that stubborn defiance he recognized from the mirror. Rachel's determination, his own unyielding will. Dad? Sophia's voice was uncertain, as if she hadn't really expected him to come. Are you hurt? Thomas asked, his voice rougher than intended. Sophia shook her head slightly. I'm okay. How touching, Malcolm interrupted. Family reunion accomplished. Now, Mr. Harlan, the evidence? Thomas reached into his jacket, withdrawing the pocket watch. It's in here, hidden compartment. Rachel's last gift to me. He held it up so Malcolm could see, but didn't approach. Ingenious, Malcolm said, genuine appreciation in his voice. All this time, it was literally in your pocket. May I? He extended his hand. First release Sophia. Let her walk to me. Then you get the watch. Malcolm considered this, then nodded. A reasonable request. Elena, please escort Ms. Harlan to her father. Elena's grip on Sophia's shoulder tightened momentarily, then released. She gave Sophia a slight push forward. Slowly, Malcolm cautioned as Sophia began to descend the steps. No sudden movements. Sophia moved carefully, eyes locked on Thomas. Each step seemed to take an eternity. Thomas willed her to move faster, aware that Diana's window of opportunity was rapidly closing. If she hadn't found a way into the house yet, when Sophia reached the bottom step, only feet from Thomas, Malcolm spoke again. "That's far enough, Ms. Harlan. Mr. Harlan, the evidence, please." Thomas hesitated, looking into Sophia's eyes. 7 years of absence. 7 years of missed moments. 7 years he could never get back. "It's okay, Dad," Sophia said quietly. "I understand now." The words, so simple, so unexpected, broke something open in Thomas's chest. A dam he'd built around his grief, his guilt, his love for this child he'd failed so completely. Before he could respond, a sound cut through the night, a distinctive crack that Thomas recognized instantly. Gunshot. From inside the house. "Diana." Malcolm's head turned toward the sound, momentarily distracted. In that split second, Thomas acted. He lunged forward, grabbing Sophia, pulling her to him with one arm while throwing the pocket watch with the other, not to Malcolm, but past him through the open front door into the house. "Run!" Thomas shouted, pushing Sophia toward the darkness beyond the driveway. Chaos erupted. Marcus drew his weapon. Malcolm shouted orders. Elena moved with unexpected speed, producing a small handgun from beneath her jacket. Thomas tackled Sophia to the ground as bullets tore through the space where they'd been standing. They rolled together down a slight embankment beside the driveway, landing in wet shrubbery. "Stay down!" Thomas hissed, covering Sophia's body with his own as more shots rang out. "The evidence?" Sophia gasped. "You threw it away." "It doesn't matter." Thomas raised his head slightly, assessing their position. "Nothing matters except getting you out of here." Shouts came from the house, multiple voices, signs of struggle. Diana had created the diversion they needed, but at what cost? "We need to move," Thomas said, helping Sophia to her feet while staying low in the shrubbery. "There's a break in the wall near the service entrance. If we can reach it." A bullet splintered bark inches from Thomas's head. Elena Varga stood at the top of the embankment, weapon at raised, expression coldly professional. "That's far enough," she said. "Back to the house, both of you." Thomas pushed Sophia behind him, shielding her with his body. "Let her go. She's just a child. She knows nothing." "That's not my decision to make." Elena kept the gun trained on them. "Mr. Hayes has invested too much in this operation to risk exposure now. Move back up the hill, slowly." Thomas assessed their options. The darkness provided some cover, but Elena had the high ground and a clear line of fire. Any sudden movement would likely result in one or both of them being shot. "Dad," Sophia whispered, her hand finding his. "I'm sorry for everything I said. I didn't mean." "I know," Thomas interrupted, squeezing her hand. "I'm the one who should apologize. For all of it. But we're going to get out of this. Trust me." He began moving up the embankment, keeping Sophia behind him, mind racing through scenarios, looking for an opening, any advantage. When the shot came, it wasn't from Elena's gun. It came from behind them, from the darkness beyond the wall. Elena jerked backward, weapon discharging harmlessly into the air as she fell. Thomas didn't hesitate. He grabbed Sophia's hand and ran not toward the house, but away from it, toward the source of the unexpected assistance, toward the break in the wall he'd mentioned. More gunfire erupted behind them, Malcolm's security engaging with an unknown threat. Thomas didn't look back, focused only on reaching the gap in the perimeter, on getting Sophia to safety. They reached the wall, found the narrow break of service access where a section of stone had been removed for repairs. Thomas pushed Sophia through first, then followed, emerging onto a quiet suburban street where a car waited, engine running. Victor Reese sat behind the wheel. "Get in," the old man said, his gravelly voice urgent. "Quickly." Thomas hesitated, one hand still gripping Sophia's. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I just saved your lives," Victor replied. "And because Diana Morgan is still in that house creating a diversion that's about to end. Now get in the damn car, or we all die tonight." Sophia looked at Thomas, awaiting his decision. This man had betrayed him, had worked for Malcolm Hayes, had been complicit in Rachel's murder. And yet he'd provided the knife that allowed Thomas to escape the pier. Had now appeared at the precise moment they needed rescue. "Dad?" Sophia's voice was steady despite everything. "What do we do?" Thomas made his choice. "Get in the car." They climbed into the back seat together, Sophia first, then Thomas. Victor accelerated immediately, driving away from the estate without headlights. "Diana?" Thomas asked, one arm wrapped protectively around Sophia. Still inside, creating quite a disturbance from the sounds of it. Victor navigated the dark streets with surprising skill for a man his age. She found the security office, tripped alarms, released gas canisters meant for intruders. Very resourceful woman. "We need to go back for her," Thomas insisted. "Not possible. Hayes has called in reinforcements. The property will be locked down in minutes. Victor glanced in the rearview mirror. She knew the risks, made her choice. Like you made yours, Thomas couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. Working for Hayes all these years, helping him escape justice, being complicit in Rachel's murder. Victor's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I've made many choices, Thomas. Some I regret more than others. He met Thomas's eyes briefly in the mirror. Rachel was never supposed to be harmed. That wasn't part of the arrangement. What arrangement? Thomas demanded. What possible justification could you have for working with Hayes? The same justification many others had. Protection, security, the promise that certain indiscretions would be forgotten. Victor's voice was heavy with resignation. Hayes has information on everyone, Thomas. Everyone who matters. Judges, prosecutors, police, politicians. No one is clean. No one is beyond reach. Including you, Thomas said. What did he have on you, Victor? What was worth Rachel's life? Victor didn't answer immediately, focusing on navigating onto the highway merging with sparse late-night traffic. My son, he said finally. My only child, involved in things I won't describe. Things that would have put him in prison for decades. Hayes offered an alternative. So you sold your soul. I made a choice. Victor's voice hardened. As you made yours 7 years ago, choosing the job over your family. We all have our compromises, Thomas. Our failures. The words struck home with painful accuracy. Thomas felt Sophia stiffen beside him, then relax as she leaned against his shoulder. It doesn't matter now, she said quietly. We need to focus on getting somewhere safe. The simple practicality of the statement, so adult, so measured, hit Thomas like a physical blow. When had his little girl grown up? How much had he missed in 7 years of obsessive pursuit? The flash drive, Thomas said suddenly. Rachel's evidence. I threw it into the house. I know, Victor replied. I saw. Quite a dramatic gesture. Fortunately, not your only copy. Thomas stared at the back of Victor's head. What are you talking about? Rachel was thorough, methodical, like you. Victor changed lanes, increasing speed slightly. She would never have relied on a single copy of evidence that important. She didn't have time to make copies, Thomas argued. They killed her the same day she found the files. Not quite. Victor's eyes met his in the mirror again. She found the evidence 3 days before her death, made multiple copies, sent one to me in fact, though I was required to destroy it when Hayes discovered its existence. Thomas felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath him. 3 days, she knew for 3 days and didn't tell me until she had no choice, Victor finished. She was gathering more evidence, building a stronger case, protecting you by keeping you in the dark until she was ready. The revelation was a knife to Thomas's heart. Rachel had been investigating independently, taking risks he hadn't known about, putting herself in danger while trying to protect him. Where was the other copy sent? Thomas asked, voice hollow. Your sister, Catherine. Rachel mailed it the day before she died, a flash drive hidden in a piece of jewelry, a gift for Sophia's upcoming birthday. Thomas felt Sophia's hand find his squeezing tightly. The butterfly necklace, she whispered. Mom gave it to Aunt Catherine for my birthday. I still have it. Hayes never knew about that copy, Victor continued. Rachel was clever. The packaging, the timing, it looked like nothing more than a mother's gift to her daughter. Thomas struggled to process this information. For 7 years, he'd been hunting evidence that had been with Sophia all along, with the daughter he'd abandoned in his quest for vengeance. Why are you telling us this now? Thomas asked Victor. Why help us at all after 7 years of working for Hayes? Victor was silent for a long moment, the only sound the hum of tires on asphalt, the soft whisper of the heater. Because there are lines even I won't cross, he said finally. Using children as leverage, threatening family members. Hayes has changed over the years, become more ruthless, less discriminating. He glanced at Sophia in the mirror. And because I owe Rachel that much, at least, to protect her daughter when I failed to protect her. The highway stretched before them empty in the small hours of the morning. Chicago's lights receded behind them. Where are we going? Sophia asked, breaking the heavy silence. Away from Chicago, Victor answered. Somewhere Hayes won't look immediately. I have a cabin in Wisconsin, remote, secure. We can regroup there, decide next steps. Diana, Thomas said again, we can't just leave her. If she survives, she'll contact her team. The FBI will respond. Victor's tone suggested he thought this unlikely. Our priority now is keeping Sophia safe until we can access the evidence in her necklace. and get it to the right people. The right people, Thomas repeated skeptically. After everything you've said about Hayes's network, who exactly are the right people? I have some ideas, Victor said. Old contacts, people who aren't compromised. But first we need to reach the cabin, rest, plan. Thomas looked down at Sophia, who had finally succumbed to exhaustion, her head resting against his shoulder, eyes closed in uneasy sleep. His daughter, the one person who should have mattered more than his obsessive quest for justice. The one person he'd failed most completely. I'm sorry, he whispered too quietly for Victor to hear. For everything. Sophia didn't stir, but her hand remained in his, a tenuous connection he vowed never to break again. The car continued north, carrying them away from Chicago, away from Malcolm Hayes, away from the wreckage of Thomas's 7-year crusade, toward an uncertain future but one they would face together. For the first time in 7 years, Thomas Harlan wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about redemption, about second chances, about what really mattered. The pocket watch was gone, but its inscription remained burned in his memory. Time is precious, spend it wisely. It had taken 7 years and nearly losing everything. But Thomas finally understood what Rachel had been trying to tell him, what she had always known. That time once lost could never be reclaimed. That the most precious moments weren't spent in pursuit of justice or vengeance, but in the company of those you loved. That sometimes the hardest thing to do was also the most important. Let go, move forward, choose life over death, love over hate, family over everything else. Thomas tightened his arm around his sleeping daughter and made a silent vow. Whatever came next, whatever dangers still awaited them, he would not make the same mistake again. This time he would choose Sophia. Dawn broke over the Wisconsin forest, pale light filtering through pine branches heavy with morning dew. The cabin stood in a small clearing, weathered logs silver with age, smoke curling from the stone chimney. Inside, Thomas sat at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee cooling before him, watching Sophia sleep on the couch across the room. In sleep, she looked younger, the tension and wariness that had marked her face erased. She had Rachel's profile, the same delicate nose, the same stubborn chin. But the set of her jaw, the furrow between her brows, even in slumber, those were his. She's resilient, Victor said quietly, entering from the back porch. Like her parents. Thomas didn't look up. She shouldn't have to be. Victor poured himself coffee, moving with the deliberate care of an aging man who felt every one of his 70 years. No, but we don't get to choose our circumstances, only how we respond to them. The philosophical platitude irritated Thomas. You chose your circumstances, Victor. You chose to work with Hayes, to betray Rachel, to lie to me for 7 years. Victor accepted the rebuke with a slight nod. Yes, and I'll carry those choices to my grave. He sat across from Thomas, hands wrapped around his mug for warmth. But we need to focus on the present danger, not past failures. Thomas finally looked at the man who had been both mentor and betrayer. Victor Reese had aged dramatically in the last 24 hours, the lines in his face deeper, the shadows beneath his eyes darker. Whether from physical exhaustion or moral weight, Thomas couldn't tell. Perhaps both. Diana Morgan, Thomas said. Any word? Victor shook his head. Nothing on the police channels I've been monitoring. Nothing on the news about a disturbance at Hayes's property. He's contained it as expected. She could still be alive. Possible but unlikely. Victor's expression was grim. Hayes would want to question her about who else knows, about her FBI team. He wouldn't kill her immediately. The implication hung in the air between them. Diana might be alive, but her situation would be worse than death. We need to help her, Thomas said. We need to protect Sophia, Victor countered. Use the evidence Rachel left to dismantle Hayes's organization properly this time. That's how we help Diana and everyone else Hayes has harmed. Thomas glanced at Sophia again, still sleeping, one hand tucked beneath her cheek in a gesture so like Rachel's that it made his chest ache. The necklace, he said. We need to get it. It's in Seattle with Catherine, Victor confirmed. I've arranged for a courier, trusted, off Hayes's radar. He'll bring it here. When? Tomorrow morning at the earliest. Victor sipped his coffee. Until then, we stay here. Stay quiet. Hayes will be looking for you in Chicago, not northern Wisconsin. Sophia stirred on the couch, eyelids fluttering. Thomas moved to her side, immediately perching on the edge of the coffee table. She woke fully, eyes focusing on him with momentary confusion, then recognition. Dad. Her voice was rough with sleep. Where are we? Safe. Thomas said the word of promise. Victor's cabin in Wisconsin. How are you feeling? Sophia sat up slowly, wincing as she moved her wrists still raw from the restraints at Hayes's estate. I'm okay, hungry. Victor appeared with a glass of water and 2 pain relievers. Breakfast in 10 minutes, eggs, bacon, the works. Sophia accepted the pills and water with a murmured thanks, then fixed Thomas with a direct gaze that was pure Rachel. What's the plan? How do we stop Hayes? The question caught Thomas off guard, not its content but its assumption of shared purpose. We, not you, we. The evidence your mother found, Thomas began. The copy she sent to Catherine for your birthday. The butterfly necklace, Sophia finished. I remember. Mom said it was special, that the butterfly would always help me find my way home. Her voice caught slightly. I never understood what she meant. There's a flash drive hidden inside it, Thomas explained. Evidence against Hayes, financial records, names of officials he's compromised, everything needed to bring down his entire network. Sophia absorbed this, connecting pieces in real time. That's why you've been hunting him all these years. Why you stayed away. You were trying to finish what Mom started. The simple truth of it, spoken without accusation, hit Thomas harder than any recrimination could have. Yes, he admitted, but I was wrong, Sophia. I thought justice for your mother meant catching Hayes myself, proving she was right, avenging her death. He reached for her hand, half expecting her to pull away. She didn't. I should have been with you instead. Nothing was more important than that. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. You're here now, she said, voice stronger than it had any right to be. We'll finish this together. Thomas felt something crack open inside him, a door sealed shut for 7 years, finally allowing light to enter. Before he could respond, Victor's voice cut through the moment. Company, he said sharply, looking out the front window. Vehicle coming up the drive. Thomas was on his feet, instantly moving to Sophia's side. Expecting anyone? No. Victor retrieved a shotgun from beside the fireplace. Back bedroom. There's a trap door under the rug. Root cellar. Go. Now. Thomas helped Sophia to her feet, guiding her toward the hallway, but she resisted. What about you? I'll be right behind you, Thomas promised. Go. This time Sophia obeyed, disappearing down the hallway. Thomas turned to Victor, who was checking the shotgun with practiced hands. If that's Hayes's people, I'll buy you time, Victor finished. Old man with a cabin in the woods, nothing suspicious. While they're questioning me, you and Sophia go out the back through the trees. There's an ATV in the shed behind the woodpile. Keys under the seat. Thomas hesitated. Despite everything, despite 7 years of lies and manipulation, Victor was prepared to sacrifice himself to protect them. Victor, go, Thomas. The old man's voice was firm. Make this right. For Rachel, for Sophia, for all of us who made the wrong choices. The sound of tires on gravel grew louder. Thomas gave Victor a final nod, then followed Sophia down the hallway, closing the bedroom door behind him. The trap door was where Victor had described, concealed beneath a worn area rug. Thomas pulled it open, revealing wooden steps descending into darkness. Sophia went first, Thomas following, pulling the rug back into place before closing the trap door. The root cellar was small but well-maintained. Shelves lined with preserves and supplies. A battery-powered lantern provided dim light. Thomas pressed his ear to the ceiling, listening. Voices above, muffled, unintelligible. Then footsteps moving through the cabin. What's happening? Sophia whispered. Not sure, Thomas replied, keeping his voice low. Stay quiet. More footsteps. A door opening the front door from the sound of it. Then a woman's voice clear enough to penetrate the floorboards. Victor, it's Diana Morgan. Are you alone? Thomas froze. Diana, alive. Here. Agent Morgan. Victor's voice carried surprise and relief. How did you find this place? Followed you from Chicago. Wasn't easy with a bullet in my shoulder. Thomas was already moving toward the trap door when Sophia caught his arm. Wait, she whispered. It could be a trap. The caution, so mature, so careful, gave Thomas pause. She was right. Diana appearing alone, wounded but alive at a remote cabin. It was either miraculous or suspicious. Let me check first, he whispered gently, removing Sophia's hand. Stay here until I'm sure it's safe. Sophia nodded reluctantly. Thomas climbed the steps, eased the trapdoor open, and emerged into the bedroom. Gun drawn, he moved silently to the door, listening. Escape through a service tunnel, Diana was saying. Hayes' security was focused on you and Thomas. I managed to download surveillance footage from their system before I left. Evidence of Sophia's kidnapping at minimum. You're bleeding, Victor observed. Let me help with that. Later. Where are Thomas and Sophia? Thomas made his decision. He opened the bedroom door, gun still raised. Right here. Diana Morgan stood in the cabin's main room, one hand pressed to her left shoulder, where a makeshift bandage was soaked through with blood. Her face was pale with pain and exhaustion, but her eyes were clear alert. Thomas? She said, relief evident in her voice. Thank God. How did you find us? Thomas kept the gun steady, not yet convinced. Tracked Victor's car using FBI resources. Remote access from my phone. She gestured to the device on the table. Not easy while bleeding out, but I've had worse days. Thomas studied her, looking for signs of deception, coercion. Hayes let you escape. Hayes wasn't there when I got out. Left with Reed to deal with the peer situation, I think. Diana winced as she shifted position. Look, I understand the caution, but I've been driving for hours with a bullet in my shoulder. Could we maybe establish trust after I don't bleed out on this nice hardwood floor? Victor moved to support Diana as her knees buckled slightly. She's telling the truth, Thomas. The wound is real, and if Hayes had followed her, we'd already be dead. Thomas lowered the gun slowly. Sophia, he called. It's okay, you can come out. The trapdoor opened and Sophia emerged, eyes immediately finding Diana's wounded shoulder. Without hesitation, she moved to help Victor guide Diana to the couch. First aid kit, she said to Thomas, and clean towels, warm water. Thomas complied, watching with surprise as Sophia took charge of Diana's wound with practiced efficiency. Aunt Catherine's a nurse, Sophia explained, catching his expression as she cleaned the injury. She taught me basics. This needs real medical attention, but I can clean and rebandage it for now. Diana submitted to Sophia's ministrations with a tight smile. Your daughter's impressive, Harlan. Yes, Thomas agreed, the simple truth of it hitting him anew. She is. While Sophia worked, Diana briefed them on her escape from Hayes' estate. The security office she'd located, the surveillance footage she'd downloaded to her phone, the service tunnel she'd discovered behind a false wall in the wine cellar. Hayes has gotten sloppy, she observed. 7 years ago, you'd never have found an escape route in one of his properties. Success breeds complacency, Victor noted. He believed himself untouchable, above consequences. Not anymore. Diana grimaced as Sophia secured a fresh bandage. The footage I downloaded shows Sophia being held against her will, shows Hayes himself ordering her detention. It's not everything, but it's enough to open an official investigation. An investigation Hayes will shut down as soon as he activates his protection network, Thomas countered. Judges, prosecutors, politicians, he has people everywhere. Not everywhere, Diana insisted. My direct superior, Deputy Director Carter, is clean. I trust him with my life. With this evidence and Rachel's files from the necklace, we can build a case that bypasses Hayes' usual channels. Thomas exchanged a glance with Victor. The necklace is in Seattle. We're arranging to have it brought here. Too slow. Diana shook her head. Hayes will find us eventually. We need to move faster. She looked at Sophia. When was the last time you wore the necklace? Sophia considered. About a month ago, for a school dance. And it's definitely at your aunt's house in Seattle. In my jewelry box, top drawer of my dresser. Diana nodded decisively. We need that necklace now, today. I can have FBI agents in Seattle retrieve it. No, Thomas interrupted. We can't risk involving anyone else until we know exactly who's compromised. Hayes has people in the FBI and local law enforcement. Then what do you suggest? Diana challenged. We can't wait for your courier, and we can't sit here hoping Hayes doesn't find us. Victor cleared his throat. There's another option. Catherine could bring the necklace herself. Direct flight from Seattle to Minneapolis. 4 hours. We could meet her there. That puts Catherine at risk, Thomas objected. We're all at risk, Sophia said quietly. Aunt Catherine would want to help. She's stronger than you think, Dad. Thomas looked at his daughters, really looked at her, and saw not the child he'd left behind 7 years ago, but a young woman with her own mind, her own strength, her mother's strength. Okay, he said finally, call Catherine, but we need a secure meeting place, somewhere public enough to be safe but private enough to make an exchange. Mall of America, Diana suggested. Crowded, multiple exits, security cameras everywhere. Hayes would be crazy to try anything there. The plan took shape quickly. Catherine would take the next flight to Minneapolis with the necklace. They would meet at the mall's east entrance at 4 p.m. Diana would contact Deputy Director Carter, arranging for a secure team to meet them and take possession of the evidence, both Rachel's files and Diana's footage from Hayes' estate. What about Hayes? Thomas asked. He'll be looking for all of us. I have an idea about that, Diana said. Something to keep him occupied while we make the exchange. Malcolm Hayes sat in his Chicago office watching Marcus Reed pace like a caged predator. The elegant space, all dark wood and leather, felt oppressive today, the morning sunlight unable to penetrate the heavy curtains drawn across floor-to-ceiling windows. They've gone completely off-grid, Reed reported, frustration evident in his voice. No credit card activity, no phone signals. The woman Agent Morgan heard a vehicle was found abandoned at a rest stop near the Wisconsin border. And Victor, Malcolm's voice remained calm, controlled, though a muscle in his jaw twitched sporadically. Nothing since he left the estate. GPS in his car was disabled. He knows our methods. Of course he does. He helped design them. Malcolm steepled his fingers, considering options. The flash drive Thomas threw into the house. Analysis. Reed hesitated. Encrypted. Our people are working on it, but initial assessment is concerning. Financial records, communications, names. Rachel's evidence, Malcolm murmured. After all these years. He rose, moving to the window, parting the curtains slightly to look out at the Chicago skyline. What about the daughter? Any sign of other evidence in her possession? None yet. Elena is at the Seattle house now conducting a thorough search. Malcolm nodded absently. The timing is problematic. The shipment arrives tonight. 12 girls, high-value clients already paid in full. He turned back to Reed. We can't afford disruption. Not now. We should cancel, Reed advised. Too much heat. No. Malcolm's tone brooked no disagreement. The clients we're dealing with don't accept cancellations. We proceed as planned. He returned to his desk, pressing an intercom button. Send in Ms. Chen. Moments later, a young woman entered, petite, elegant, with the poised demeanor of someone twice her apparent age. Lynch and Malcolm's newest associate, recruited from Hong Kong's financial sector for her brilliant mind and complete lack of moral constraints. Mr. Hayes, she said, inclining her head slightly, you wanted to see me. Status of our financial preparations. Complete. The offshore transfers are scheduled. The foundation accounts are clean. The charitable donation to the governor's campaign has been processed through 3 separate shells. She smiled thinly. Completely untraceable. And our contingency plans. In place. The jet is fueled and ready at the private airfield. New identities prepared. Funds distributed to accounts in 7 countries. We can be operational again within 48 hours if necessary. Malcolm nodded, satisfied. Good. And the other matter we discussed? Lynn's smile widened slightly. Taken care of. The information you requested about Deputy Director Carter has been compiled. She placed a thumb drive on his desk. Family details, financial records, medical history, the usual pressure points. Malcolm took the drive, turning it over in his fingers. Excellent. That will be all for now. After Lynn departed, Reed broke the silence. You still think Harlan will go to the FBI? I know he will, Malcolm corrected. His entire crusade has been about bringing me to justice. With Rachel's evidence and Agent Morgan's support, he'll approach someone high enough to bypass my usual channels. He held up the thumb drive. Which is why we need this. Reed frowned. Carter has a clean reputation. No handles, no leverage we've found before. Everyone has leverage, Marcus. Everyone. Malcolm inserted the drive into his computer. It's simply a matter of finding it. As the files opened on his screen, Malcolm Hayes smiled, the cold, satisfied expression of a predator who had just spotted wounded prey. The Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport hummed with midday activity. Catherine Harlan emerged from the arrival gate, a slender woman in her mid-40s with Rachel's auburn hair streaked with premature gray. She clutched a small carry-on bag with white-knuckled intensity eyes scanning the crowd. Thomas watched from a distance, positioned near a coffee shop with clear sight lines to the gate. Sophia stood beside him, disguised with a baseball cap and oversized sunglasses borrowed from Diana. The reunion with Catherine would need to wait until they reached the mall, where Victor and Diana were already in position. "That's her," Sophia whispered unnecessarily. "She looks scared." Thomas nodded, watching his sister follow the directions they'd provided, proceeding to ground transportation, taking the light rail toward the mall. They would follow at a distance, watching for any sign of the surveillance. "Does she have the necklace?" Thomas asked. "Yes, she texted me from the plane. It's in her purse." They boarded the next light rail car, staying separate from Catherine, but keeping her in sight. Thomas scanned each station as they passed, alert for familiar faces, suspicious behavior. Nothing obvious, but Hayes's people were professionals. They wouldn't be obvious. The Mall of America loomed ahead, a behemoth of American consumerism. 4 floors of retail space surrounding a central amusement park, all enclosed in glass and steel. Over 100,000 visitors daily, the perfect place to disappear into a crowd. Catherine entered through the east entrance as planned. Thomas and Sophia waited 5 minutes, then followed, staying 20 yards behind. According to the plan, Victor would make first contact, ensuring Catherine wasn't being tracked, before leading her to the rendezvous point on the 3rd floor, a quiet seating area near the less frequented North Food Court. Thomas kept Sophia close, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder as they navigated through shoppers. The familiar weight of a gun pressed against his lower back, Diana's backup weapon provided for emergencies only. He prayed they wouldn't need it. "There," Sophia said quietly, nodding toward an escalator where Victor had appeared beside Catherine. The old man spoke briefly to her, then they began ascending together. Thomas and Sophia followed at a distance, taking a different escalator to the 3rd floor. Diana would be waiting at the rendezvous point, having arrived separately with a secure phone to contact Deputy Director Carter once they had the evidence in hand. The North Food Court was sparsely populated at this hour, too late for lunch, too early for dinner. Thomas spotted Diana at a corner table, baseball cap pulled low, nursing a soft drink. Victor and Catherine approached her position from the opposite direction. "Almost there," Thomas murmured to Sophia. "Stay close." They were halfway across the food court when Thomas felt it, the prickling awareness at the base of his skull that had saved his life countless times during his FBI career. The sensation of being watched, hunted. He scanned the area casually, not breaking stride. Nothing obvious. But the feeling persisted. "Dad?" Sophia sensed his tension. "What's wrong, Westo?" "Not sure," he replied, guiding her toward Diana's table with slightly increased urgency. "Just stay close." They reached the table just as Victor and Catherine arrived. Catherine's eyes widened at the sight of Sophia, tears immediately welling. "Sophia," she breathed, reaching for her niece. "Thank God." Sophia stepped into her aunt's embrace briefly, then pulled back. "The necklace," Catherine nodded, reaching into her purse with trembling hands. "Here, just like you asked." The butterfly necklace was delicate silver filigree with small blue stones for the body. A teenager's jewelry, but with hidden purpose. Thomas took it, examining the clasp where Rachel had concealed the flash drive. "We need to move," Diana said quietly, eyes scanning the food court. "Something doesn't feel right." Thomas nodded, having reached the same conclusion. "Catherine, you need to leave. Now. Different exit back to the airport." "But I just got here," Catherine protested. "Sophia." "Will be safe with me," Thomas finished. "I promise. But you need to go, please." Catherine hesitated, then embraced Sophia once more. "Be careful," she whispered. "I love you." "Love you too," Sophia replied, voice steady despite the tension surrounding them. "Go, we'll be okay." As Catherine departed, Thomas worked at the necklace, clasped fingers, searching for the hidden mechanism Rachel had designed. There, a small indentation, nearly invisible unless you knew to look for it. He pressed twisted, and a compartment opened, revealing a tiny flash drive. "Got it," he said, handing the drive to Diana. She pocketed it alongside her phone containing the surveillance footage. "I'll contact Carter now. He can have a team here in 20 minutes. "Too long," Victor murmured, his attention fixed on something across the food court. "We have company." Thomas followed his gaze. Three men had entered the area, spreading out, moving with the purposeful casualness of hunters closing in on prey. Not Hayes's usual security, these men were different. Harder, military bearing, specialists. Exit strategy, Thomas said to Diana. Now. Service corridor behind the Chinese restaurant, she replied without hesitation. Leads to employee areas, then loading docks. Thomas nodded. Go. Take Sophia and Victor. I'll create a diversion. Dad, no, Sophia protested. We stay together. I'll be right behind you, Thomas promised. But we need to split their focus. Before Sophia could argue further, one of the men made eye contact with Thomas across the food court. The hunter's recognition was immediate, unmistakable. Cover blown. Go, Thomas urged, pushing Sophia toward Diana. Now, Diana grabbed Sophia's arm, pulling her toward the service corridor. Victor followed, moving with surprising speed for a man his age. Thomas moved in the opposite direction, drawing the hunter's attention. The men responded instantly, two pursuing Thomas, while the third followed Diana's group. Exactly as Thomas had intended, dividing their forces, giving Sophia a better chance of escape. Thomas wove through mall patrons, keeping his pace measured, avoiding a full sprint that would attract more attention. The gun at his back remained untouched. Firing in a crowded mall was unthinkable unless absolutely necessary. He glanced back. The two men were gaining professional in their pursuit, maintaining distance while maneuvering for containment rather than immediate capture. Thomas cut through a department store using clothing racks as obstacles, then ducked into a service hallway marked Employees Only. The narrow corridor stretched ahead, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Thomas moved quickly, listening for pursuit. Footsteps behind him, one set, not two. They'd split up, likely trying to cut him off from another direction. A fire exit appeared ahead. Thomas pushed through, emerging onto a maintenance walkway overlooking the mall's central amusement park. Below, roller coasters and carnival rides operated amid the shrieks of delighted children. Above, a glass ceiling let in afternoon sunlight. Thomas moved along the walkway, searching for stairs down for any route that might lead him back to Sophia. Behind him, the fire door opened again. One pursuer had followed. The other was still unaccounted for. The walkway ended at a maintenance ladder descending to the amusement park level. Thomas climbed down quickly, dropping the last few feet to the ground. The area was crowded, offering both cover and complications. He couldn't lead these men into the midst of families and children. Thomas spotted a service entrance for one of the rides, ducked inside. The mechanical room was loud, hot, filled with the hum of motors powering the attraction. He moved through it, finding another door that led to a back corridor running behind the rides. Here, finally, he drew the weapon. The pursuing specialist would be armed as well, and in this isolated area, civilian exposure was minimal. Thomas positioned himself at a corner, listening. Footsteps approached, measured and cautious. The hunter closing in. Thomas timed his move carefully, then stepped out, weapon raised. Federal agent, he said, the old identification coming automatically despite its inaccuracy. Hands where I can see them. The specialist, a lean, hard-faced man with military short hair, froze, hands raising slightly. His eyes held no fear, only calculated assessment. Former agent, he corrected, voice carrying a slight Eastern European accent. Thomas Harlan. Hayes sends his regards. Who are you? Thomas demanded, keeping the gun steady. Does it matter? The man shrugged. I am simply the messenger. Mr. Hayes wishes to speak with you. A final conversation before your situation becomes untenable. Where's Hayes now? Nearby, waiting. The specialist's eyes flicked briefly to something behind Thomas. With your daughter. Thomas didn't fall for the obvious distraction. My daughter is far from here by now. Are you certain? The man smiled thinly. Perhaps you should check your phone. There's a message waiting. Thomas kept the gun trained on the specialist while retrieving his phone with his free hand. A text message from an unknown number. He opened it one-handed, keeping the specialist in his peripheral vision. A photo appeared. Sophia held firmly by Marcus Reed, his hand visibly pressing a gun to her side. The image was time-stamped 4 minutes ago. The loading dock didn't work out as planned, the specialist said, watching Thomas's reaction. Your daughter is unharmed, for now. Mr. Hayes would like to negotiate an exchange. Cold fury washed through Thomas, followed by something worse, despair. They had Sophia. Again. After everything, after he had promised to protect her, to choose her above all else, he had failed. What does Hayes want? Thomas asked, voice hollow. The evidence? All of it. The flash drive from the necklace. Ajit Morgan's phone with the surveillance footage. In exchange for your daughter's life. Where the parking structure, west side, top level, 20 minutes. The specialist's hands lowered slightly. You should hurry. Mr. Hayes is not known for his patience. Thomas kept the gun raised. You're coming with me. Insurance. I think not. The specialist smiled again, this time with genuine amusement. You won't shoot me. Not here. Not with children nearby. Not with your daughter's life at stake. He was right. Thomas wouldn't risk it. Couldn't risk it. 20 minutes. The specialist repeated, backing away slowly. Come alone. Bring the evidence, or don't come at all. Mr. Hayes will understand either choice. He disappeared around a corner. Thomas could have pursued, but it would accomplish nothing. The real threat, the real target was elsewhere. Hayes, Reed, the men holding Sophia. Thomas holstered the gun and ran. The top level of the west parking structure was eerily empty, cordoned off for maintenance according to temporary signs that Thomas suspected Hayes's people had placed. 3 black SUVs formed a loose semicircle near the center of the concrete expanse. Malcolm Hayes stood beside the middle vehicle, Marcus Reed at his side. No sign of Sophia. Thomas approached alone as instructed. Diana and Victor waited below, positioned at separate exits, with what remained of their hastily conceived contingency plan. Mr. Harlan, Malcolm called, his voice carrying across the empty space. Punctual as always. Thomas stopped 20 feet away. Where's my daughter? Malcolm gestured to the SUV behind him. Safe, unharmed, though understandably distressed. He studied Thomas with clinical interest. You've had quite a journey these past few days. All those years of careful investigation, and in the end, it comes down to this. A simple exchange. Evidence for family. Show me Sophia first. Malcolm nodded to Reed, who opened the SUV's rear door. Sophia sat inside, hands bound, but otherwise appearing uninjured. Her eyes found Thomas, a mixture of fear and determination in her expression. Satisfied? Malcolm asked. Now the evidence. Thomas reached into his jacket, withdrawing the butterfly necklace with its hidden flash drive still intact. Diana's phone containing the surveillance footage followed. Everything Rachel found, Thomas said. Everything Diana downloaded from your security system. All the evidence against you and your organization. Slide them over, Malcolm instructed. Slowly. Thomas placed the items on the ground, then pushed them forward with his foot. They skidded across the concrete, stopping halfway between them. Reed moved to retrieve them, keeping his gun trained on Thomas. He examined the necklace, located the hidden compartment, checked the phone. It's here, he confirmed to Hayes. Flash drive and phone. Malcolm nodded, satisfied. Excellent. Our business is concluded then. He turned to the SUV. Release the girl. Reed opened the door wider, reaching in to cut Sophia's restraints. She emerged cautiously, eyes never leaving Thomas. Go to your father, Malcolm said to her. Slowly. Sophia began walking, each step measured, controlled. Thomas wanted to run to her, to sweep her into his arms, to shield her from everything that had happened. But he forced himself to remain still, to let her come to him at her own pace. 10 feet separated them when Malcolm spoke again. One final matter, Mr. Harlan. His voice had changed, hardened. Insurance against future interference. Thomas saw it happening before his mind fully processed it. Reed raising his weapon. Not at Thomas, at Sophia. No, Thomas lunged forward, putting himself between Reed and his daughter. The shot came anyway, a muffled pop from a silenced handgun. Thomas felt the impact high in his chest, a burning sensation followed by spreading warmth. He staggered but remained standing, shielding Sophia with his body. Dad, Sophia screamed, catching him as he swayed. How disappointingly predictable, Malcolm sighed. The paternal sacrifice. Though I must admit I expected nothing less. Reed raised the weapon again, preparing to fire a second time. But before he could pull the trigger, another shot rang out, this one unsilenced. Deafeningly loud in the concrete structure. Reed jerked backward, dropping his gun, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. Diana Morgan stood at the entrance to the parking level, weapon raised, advancing steadily. FBI, drop your weapons, hands where I can see them. Malcolm's security team reacted instantly, drawing weapons, taking cover behind vehicles. Diana ducked behind a concrete pillar as bullets struck around her. Thomas pulled Sophia down, sheltering her behind a parked car as gunfire erupted across the parking structure. His chest burned where the bullet had struck, each breath becoming more difficult. "Dad, you're hurt." Sophia's voice was thick with fear. "You're bleeding." "It's okay." Thomas gasped, though they both knew it wasn't. "Diana has backup coming. Deputy Director Carter, FBI tactical team. Just stay down." More gunfire, shouts, the sound of breaking glass. Thomas peered around the car's bumper. Diana was pinned down, outnumbered and outgunned. Hayes was retreating toward the far exit, protected by his security team's covering fire. They were going to escape. Again. With the evidence. With everything Rachel had died for. "Stay here," Thomas told Sophia. "Don't move until it's safe." "Dad, no." But Thomas was already moving, ignoring the pain, the blood soaking his shirt. He stayed low, using vehicles for cover, circling toward the exit where Hayes was heading. His gun was in his hand, though he had no memory of drawing it. Through the haze of pain and increasing lightheadedness, Thomas saw his target. Malcolm Hayes, halfway to the exit, looking back at the firefight with the detached interest of a man watching a sporting event he hadn't bet on. Thomas stepped into his path, weapon raised. "It's over, Malcolm." Hayes showed only mild surprise. "Mr. Harlan, resilient as always." His eyes flicked to the spreading blood stain on Thomas's chest, though perhaps not for much longer. "The evidence," Thomas said, fighting to keep his voice steady, his arm from trembling. "Give it back." "I think not." Malcolm's expression was almost pitying. "You're dying, Thomas. You've minutes at best. Your daughter will watch you bleed out on this filthy concrete just as you watched Rachel die in your arms 7 years ago. Symmetry of a sort." Each word was designed to wound, to distract. Thomas recognized the tactic but found himself affected nonetheless. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision. The gun felt impossibly heavy in his hand. "You're not walking away this time," Thomas managed. "Not again." "And who will stop me?" "You and your condition." Malcolm gestured to the continuing gunfight. "Your FBI friend is outmatched. Your daughter is helpless. And you, Thomas, you are already a ghost." Thomas's finger tightened on the trigger. One shot. That's all it would take. One bullet to end the man who had destroyed so many lives. Who had ordered Rachel's murder. Who had kidnapped Sophia, threatened her, used her as leverage. Justice. Vengeance. The culmination of 7 years of single-minded pursuit. "Dad," Sophia's voice, desperate, afraid, calling for him. Thomas hesitated. Hayes noticed. The calculating smile returned to the older man's face. "Go to her, Thomas," he said softly. "In your final moments, be the father you failed to be for 7 years. It's the only gift I'll offer you." The gun wavered in Thomas's hand. Sophia needed him. Now, not 7 years ago, not in some hypothetical future after justice was served. Now, the choice that had haunted him for 7 years presented itself again. Justice or family, the mob or those he loved. This time Thomas chose differently. He lowered the gun. "This isn't over," he told Hayes. "The truth always surfaces eventually." "Perhaps," Malcolm conceded, "but you won't be here to see it." He stepped past Thomas, continuing toward the exit. Thomas let him go, turning back toward the sound of Sophia's voice. Each step was agony, the wound in his chest a burning coal with each heartbeat. But he kept moving, toward his daughter, toward the only thing that truly mattered. He found Sophia where he'd left her, crouched behind the parked car. Her face tear-streaked and terrified, transformed with relief at the sight of him. "Dad." Thomas collapsed beside her, strength finally failing. Sophia caught him, easing him down, pressing her hands against his wound in a desperate attempt to stem the bleeding. "Stay with me," she pleaded. "Please, don't go." Thomas looked up at his daughter Rachel's eyes, his stubborn chin, a perfect blend of them both. 16 years old and braver than he'd ever been. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything, for not being there, for choosing the wrong things." "Stop," Sophia ordered, voice cracking. "Save your strength. Help is coming." The gunfire had ceased. Diana's voice called out, moving closer. "Thomas, Sophia." "Here," Sophia shouted. "My dad's been shot. He needs help." Thomas heard footsteps approaching, felt Diana kneel beside them. Her voice calm and professional despite the situation, ordered Sophia to maintain pressure while she checked his vitals. "Hayes," Thomas asked the word, a painful effort. "Gone," Diana confirmed. With the evidence, I'm sorry, Thomas. The darkness at the edges of his vision is spreading consciousness, slipping away despite his efforts to hold on. But one thought remained clear, crystalline in its certainty. It doesn't matter, he told Diana. Sophia is safe. That's all that matters. Diana's expression shifted to confusion. Thomas, the evidence was a copy, came another voice. Victor Reese appearing beside them, looking down at Thomas with something like respect in his rheumy eyes. Rachel's final insurance policy. 3 copies, not 2. Thomas tried to focus on the old man confusion cutting through the encroaching darkness. What? The flash drive in the necklace was a duplicate, Victor explained. The original, the one Rachel sent to me 7 years ago, the one I was ordered to destroy, I kept it, hidden, protected. My own insurance against Hayes. You lied, Thomas gasped. Again. A final deception, Victor acknowledged, for the right reasons this time. Diana looked between them. Where is it, the original? Already sent to Deputy Director Carter, electronically, while you were positioning for the exchange. Victor's lined face held grim satisfaction, along with my full confession, my role in Hayes's organization, my complicity in Rachel's death, everything. Why, Thomas managed each word more difficult than the last. After all this time, redemption, Victor said simply, too late for forgiveness, but perhaps not too late for justice. The darkness was complete now, Thomas's grip on consciousness failing. The last thing he heard was Sophia's voice, desperate and determined. Stay with me, Dad. Please, I just found you again. Don't leave me. Then nothing. Beeping monitors, the antiseptic smell of hospital rooms. Sophia asleep in a chair beside the bed, head resting on the mattress near his hand. Thomas blinked, consciousness returning in fragments, pain a dull throb beneath heavy medication. She hasn't left your side, Diana Morgan said softly from the doorway. Not once in 3 days. Thomas turned his head slightly, finding Diana leaning against the doorframe. Her arm was in a sling, face tired, but expression satisfied. Hayes, Thomas asked, voice a raspy whisper. In custody as of 6 hours ago, trying to board a private jet to Venezuela. Diana entered the room, fully taking the chair opposite Sophia. The evidence was comprehensive. Financial records, communications, names of officials on his payroll. Reed is cooperating, hoping for leniency. The entire network is unraveling. Thomas absorbed this gaze, returning to Sophia's sleeping form. And Victor, Diana's expression sobered, took his own life. After sending the evidence to Carter, left a detailed confession. His final attempt to make amends, I suppose. Thomas felt no satisfaction at the news, only a hollow acknowledgement. Victor's betrayal, his manipulation, his final redemptive act, all part of the same complex tapestry of choices and consequences. How bad? Thomas asked, gesturing vaguely to his chest. Bad enough. The bullet missed your heart by centimeters. You lost a lot of blood. Diana's professional demeanor softened slightly. But you'll recover, eventually. Thomas nodded, wincing at the movement. Catherine, safe, back in Seattle. She's been calling hourly for updates. Diana stood, adjusting her sling. I should let you rest and inform the doctors you're awake. As she moved toward the door, Thomas called after her. Diana, she turned. Thank you for everything. A rare smile crossed her face. Just doing my job, Harlan, though I might need a consultant for the cleanup. Someone who knows Hayes's operation inside and out. Once you're recovered, of course. The offer hung in the air between them. A chance to return to law enforcement, to use his knowledge, his experience, to find purpose in justice again. Before Thomas could respond, Sophia stirred, eyes blinking open. When she saw Thomas conscious, looking at her, her face transformed with pure joy. Dad, she breathed, taking his hand. You're awake. Diana slipped quietly from the room, leaving father and daughter alone. Hey, kiddo. Thomas managed, squeezing Sophia's hand weakly. Sorry for scaring you. Tears filled Sophia's eyes, but she was smiling. Don't apologize, just don't do it again. Deal. Thomas studied her face, marveling at the strength there, the resilience. What happens now is up to you, Sophia. Whatever you want, whatever you need. Sophia's expression grew serious. I want us to be a family again, Dad. Not like before. Really together this time. Seattle? Thomas asked. With Catherine. Maybe, or Chicago, or somewhere new. Sophia shrugged. It doesn't matter where, just where we're together. Thomas felt something loosen in his chest that had nothing to do with his wound, a weight he'd carried for 7 years finally lifting. Together, he agreed. No more chasing ghosts, no more living in the past. Sophia leaned forward, resting her head against his shoulder, carefully mindful of his injury. Mom would be proud of you, she whispered, for choosing me in the end. Thomas closed his eyes, arm wrapping around his daughter, despite the pain the movement caused. For the first time in 7 years, he felt Rachel's presence not as an absence, a void, but as a continuity alive in Sophia, in the love they shared, in the future they would build together. Time is precious, he murmured, echoing Rachel's final gift. Spend it wisely. And he would, with Sophia, with family, with the second chance he'd been given. Outside the hospital window, rain began to fall, gentle and cleansing. Not an ending, but a beginning. Not justice alone, but something rarer, more valuable. Redemption.